Who would ever think we would be here having to define even what gender is? We already have in certain countries where they're experimenting to certain levels rights that potentially machines could or should have, which is terrifying.
Hello, moms, dads, and grands, and welcome back to M4L Academy. I'm Missy Karwowski, and this is the school for parents, grandparents, and friends committed to defending and preserving liberty, with a special focus on topics that impact kids, schools, and of course, parental rights. Just a few short years ago, one of the hottest questions in culture, in school, and heck in government was, what is a woman? Thankfully, at least for the moment, that question has more or less been resolved. The new question we could be facing very soon is, what is a human? Or what is a human right? And should robots have rights? Believe it or not, this question has already been discussed in circles closest to the technology for quite some time, as a matter of fact. Today's guest is Kathleen Goble, a digital writer, author, and a speaker who helps American patriots cut through the noise and reclaim time, agency, and revenue. A former Fortune 100 management consultant with advanced degrees in law, business, theology, and science, she equips conservatives with principled frameworks that accelerate outcomes and strengthen America First messaging. Grounded in Christian faith and constitutional values, Kathleen empowers liberty-minded leaders to communicate clearly, defend freedom, and renew the promise of American greatness. She's the co-author of the book, The Fight for Humanity, The Case for the 28th Amendment. So buckle up, because it looks like the question of robot rights might have just become an important topic in the debate around parental rights. Welcome back to class. And welcome to the program, Kathleen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Missy.
I just said it earlier, and I will say it again. I'm particularly excited to have you here, or terrified. Mainly, or I guess I was saying that more about reading the book itself. It feels like anytime I have these conversations about AI, I am deeply fascinated, but also slightly afraid, because it just feels like such a scary topic. So can you start by telling us a little bit about your background and what led you to writing this book?
Sure. Well, it's interesting, Missy. I'm actually an avid AI user. I use it every day to write with, and I've been involved in local politics for a number of years here. And somehow it seemed like my capacity, my assignment always had something to do with communication and organization, and kind of on the admin side. And so last year I actually was contacted by a gentleman, met him online. He's a well-known podcaster, influencer out of and radio personality, Booker Scott, out of Tampa Bay, Florida, and he had contacted me and asked him if I would work with him and write this book. So neither of us are AI insiders, but we are people who are obviously, like you, very interested in the topic. It's timely, and so I got started, kind of jumped in with both feet and started doing quite a bit of research. And what we discovered, and and I'm sure we'll get into it later, but the sort of the nexus of the book was that Booker Scott had done an interview years earlier, like in about 2014, with an individual by the name of Martine Rothblatt. And Martine Rothblatt is, I believe, the founder of Sirius Radio, a futurist, inventor, a very intelligent human being, and had said, even at that time, back in 2014, there were people writing code so that, and I know we'll probably use this term interchangeably, but so that machines, AI, whatever you want to call it, anything in this sort of that electronic area, could feel and express the same type of emotions that we do as human beings, which was pretty alarming for Booker, even at that time, back in 2014. Well, he never forgot about it. Something stayed in his head for quite a few years. And last year, when he contacted me, he said, I think it's time. I think that it's time that this book be released and this information be shared. And I agree with him. It was what we ultimately kind of ended up throughout the book was that we had more questions than answers. And I know you feel that way too. I think a lot of people do about AI, but it is a fascinating topic.
It is. It's fascinating. It's scary. I think part of what's so scary about it is just a lack of understanding, truly understand, like really being able to grasp our heads around it. Like you said, we're not necessarily, most people are not going to be these technologists with a deep understanding of the machine learning that goes into it. But I actually did hear, when you mentioned the name Martine Rothblatt, I'm not going to lie, that sort of gave me the willies a little, because my knowledge and background in research of Martine Rothblatt was all really connected to gender ideology and that movement, and how the next step, which I believe that Martine Rothblatt promotes already, is transhumanism. So going away from the transgender ideology and instead moving into transhumanism, which is really just this, I think it's just a horrific concept, frankly. So I guess I'm curious, can you unpack a little, or just to be clear, like, we're not saying that was a good thing, right?
Right, absolutely. And you brought up a really great point, which is, and this is one of the many issues that we, and especially as parents, need to be aware of, is what is behind this? What is behind AI? What is behind not just one AI, but all of them, and more of them are coming out all the time. There's many levels, many areas that AI is already impacting and already embedded in our lives, which we're not aware of. And there are a lot of people that are involved, especially in the formation of it, that don't share the same values that we do, which is why it is critical that we not be so much intimidated by it, but get involved in the conversation. And I think that was kind of both Booker and I shared that belief, which was let's do quite a bit of research. I think there's over 400 footnotes or so that I ultimately ended up getting, putting in the book. And let's give people sort of the ability to research, to empower themselves, to find out where it's come from. AI's actually been around for a long time, since the late 1950s is when it was really starting to take root, and it's progressed rapidly, especially just in the last handful of years. So people need to be educated and informed and be involved in this conversation for those very reasons that you pointed out.
That is such an important statement that I don't feel like we can reiterate often enough, because this is not something that I frankly I don't actually kind of want to be in the fight. Like, I'd like to go on just living my life and not have to worry about this. And I feel like I struggle a lot with my conservative friends, and especially with female conservative friends, that it's this concept of, oh, well, that's just too bothersome. It makes me uncomfortable to think about politics or the direction that we're going. So I just don't want to think about it. I just don't like to watch the news. I just don't like to read the news. I don't want to pay attention to it. And I find it fascinating, because it's like, well, it's adorable that you don't want to pay attention to it, but it's still happening. And so whether or not you pay attention to it and are involved, the world will change, and the environment we live in, the culture we live in, will be shaped by people that don't have our worldview if you're not paying attention. So I just want to double down and appreciate your statement that we do need to be paying attention to this, because it is so important. So speaking of that, you talk about this in the book, that AI, and this is, I think, probably one of the most frequent arguments that I've heard, at least, I don't know, maybe like a year or so ago when I was really researching more, that AI isn't just like the next industrial revolution exactly, because this technological advancement is exponentially transformative and will be reshaping civilization itself. But a lot of people, because I think they just frankly aren't comfortable with technology and choose not to be, may just see it as yet another type of tool. But why do you believe that AI represents such a fundamentally different challenge to society and parents and everybody, versus other technologies that we had come around, like the internet and smartphones and all of that?
Oh, gosh, that is a huge question. Lots of answers to that, and there's many parts of it. But well, for one, just to give you an idea, this was something that I discovered actually not long ago, and that was that Max Tegmark, I think some people might be familiar with him. He's a MIT physicist, learning researcher, and he had made this statement last year. He said, up until recently, much of what has been said about AI was hype, kind of the panacea. It's going to cure cancer. This thing, it can do all kinds of amazing things. It will solve all the world's problems. But he said, so excuse me, up until recently, uh, much of what was said about AI was hype. But he said, and until the last 4 years, and in the last 4 years, he said we have underestimated AI. And something that I have discovered, and I've had an opportunity, since writing the book and doing some other things, I've been traveling and speaking actually quite a bit, which has been fun, and meeting wonderful people that share our same, worldviews and also concerns, not just about technology, but about everything that's going on in our country and world. And people often say, well, I'm not interested in, like you said, I'm not a technologist. I'm not big on technology. I'm not going to have anything to do with it. My response is, and I don't mean this flippantly, but too late. It's already embedded in absolutely every system in our society without us knowing. And we haven't voted on it. We haven't researched it. I put a paper on my website recently about consent, and the reality is it's already in systems. It's in apps that we use every day. And we've become so accustomed to, and I think in our society with convenience, like Alexa in our homes, or Siri on our phones, or streaming services. And I'm not saying that's all bad, but we've just become so used to it, we haven't recognized what's going on, and what's behind the scenes is critical, because now AI is even behind those apps. It's in systems, which impacts every single aspect of our lives. And that's not an exaggeration. So, for example, it's already embedded in hiring systems. You submit a resume online, or you apply someplace, and you just assume, that maybe it's going to be seen or maybe filtered by a human, and maybe you will get a job interview, maybe you won't. But the reality is it's already being pre-screened, by machines that use AI. Same thing in our medical system. Same thing with benefits, insurance benefits or loan applications, or all those types of things. And, we experienced so many frustrations several decades ago with the 800 numbers, where you couldn't get a chance to talk to somebody for very long. Now we've got chatbots involved. And, think of the frustration of that. Let's say you have a complaint about an insurance claim or something. Who are you going to talk to when you get it denied? And, conversations cut off, over, and even more far-reaching implications than that. So those are the types of things that I say, too late. It's already here, which is why, it is incumbent upon us to be involved, especially as parents, in what's happening with it.
One other thing I've heard you talk about too, is that the idea that it's not just AI, but there's a difference between an AI and AGI. And for anyone who has not heard of that, it's artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence. So you said that there's been a fundamental shift over the past 4 years, that we we underestimated it. So is it because of this rise of AGI, or the nearing of that? And before anything, can you just define what those things are?
Sure. So where we've been recently is that we've been in what's called narrow AI, where it's very specific, meaning task specific to a thing. Like, let's say an AI reads, an insurance claim, or AI reads X-ray or something like that. But now, and even the industry insiders, Sam Altman and Elon Musk and those types of people, disagree. They agree that it's coming. But AGI is artificial general intelligence. And what that means is that it can cross domains, which again, dual purpose. It's both powerful, but also very scary, meaning that, let's say in a matter of hours, an AI, and they disagree as to, not that it's coming, they say that it is, but when it'll arrive. Some say as soon as the end of this year or maybe next. And that AI, that artificial general intelligence, crossing multiple domains, let's say its assignment right now is reading x-rays or something like that. But then that AI, if it were AGI, would have the ability to read many other types of documents and make decisions and teach itself things. So this is where you have people like, and you mentioned Martine Rothblatt earlier, but people that are very much on the science side say that what should define a person would be strictly not the biological aspect, like people like you and I that share those types of values, but the fact that a machine can do things like a human being. They say that ability should define what they refer to as consciousness. And so that's pretty scary because now it has power. Some people may have heard the story, and I believe it was early last year, where there was an AI, and it was Anthropic's Claude AI, from my recollection. But a coder, somebody that was inside, was working with this AI, and they discovered that it was writing code to preserve itself, self-preservation. And it even threatened him, saying, "Look, I know I have access to all your other electronic equipment. I know you're having an extramarital affair, and this will become exposed if you try to do anything to alter this code." So and I was never a sci-fi person, but I've had people tell me, "Oh, that's the Terminator movies. That's these things where these robots or machines take over." And there is that fear. I mean, there are even industry insiders, people that say this is potentially the end of all humanity as we know it if we don't handle this correctly. So that's kind of the long answer, but the distinction between AI and then this artificial general intelligence, where it seems that we are heading very quickly.
Oh yeah, I mean there is a book that I read last summer, came out last summer, called "If anyone builds this, then everyone will die, or we all die," or something like that. And it is essentially just summarizes that right there, and it lays out a scenario of AI reaching artificial general intelligence or artificial super general intelligence. I can't remember which, and that it essentially goes on a mission to preserve itself. Spoiler alert for everyone, and the importance, just like the title says, that if someone builds this, then we all die. So not the most encouraging thing. It's a little hard to maintain hope in these areas or when talking about something like this. So I want to take a quick second and say, like, why should we? What is the benefit? Because it feels so overwhelming, honestly. I mean, this stuff feels like we're never going to stand a chance, any of that. So why should we even be working to preserve any good if we don't even stand a chance? Because after all, like it or not, we have good values, we have good reasons, maybe for using some of these tools, and we want to have medical advances, etc. But there's always going to be somebody bad out there who chooses to take advantage of anything, which is really unfortunate. Give me a quick plug for why people should stay involved and stay engaged on this.
Well, in the book, we refer to this, I think, at the outset, saying that we believe, and having done this research, this could be very well the most consequential decision of our time, getting involved. And when I started working on the research and the writing of the book, quickly memories flooded in about COVID, and that's what it very much reminded me of. It's like, oh, potentially here we go again. And if we set this one out, we know for a fact that people will be making decisions for us. For example, think about the people that are either unwilling or unable to define what a woman is. Do we want those people making decisions for us and our children on how this AI will be used? And, speaking of Max Tegmark and MIT, they even came out with a research paper, a couple of them, of course, but last year early on, that said that AI is rife with political bias. So the coding that's behind AI, the people that are working on it. There is so much data going in, and the training of these AIs that's happening. And many of those people, they said absolutely, and there's plenty of research and documentation you can find online, but very left leaning, very skewed away from the very values that you and I share, and I'm sure many of your listeners and watchers share as well. And that is why we have to step up. We have to be involved, because these things are happening whether we participate or not.
Yep, that's exactly right. I really appreciate that, because that is an absolute fact. Real quick, one final thing, and then I have a list of other questions, but you made a comment earlier that was really interesting to me, and it was about the concept of defining humanism or consciousness. And you talk about this also in the book, the idea of the 28th Amendment and preserving humanity. So I'm sure we'll discuss that a bit more, but I mean, you just said there, like, we have half the politicians were saying that they couldn't even define what a woman is. So how are we able to define what a human is? What makes someone sentient or conscious? And just talk to us real quick about what is the definition, maybe, that's understood, and what are we looking at as far as risks? Like, why do we need an amendment to define what humanity is? What risks are we looking at if we don't?
Well, there's a lot there. Very good question, Missy. You know, and you mentioned the word sentient, which a lot of people are not familiar with, but what it means is feeling. So there again, like we were discussing in the first part of the conversation with people like Martine Rothblatt and others who are, very, very just specific about science, saying, science should define from beginning to end what a person is, or giving it personhood. And of course, therein brings in all kinds of other potential applications. For example, legal rights. If somebody believes that a machine and advocates for it, which very well could happen, right? Advocates that a machine should have rights. Does it vote? Can it own property? Does it have potentially employment rights? Employment law could enter in here. So we're in a situation right now, and we're moving so quickly with this advancement in technology, it's preceding legal precedents and things. We already have in certain countries where they're experimenting to certain levels rights that potentially machines could or should have, which is terrifying. When we can't even define what consciousness is or what defines a human. So in the book, we have a simple call to action. I mean, simple in that it's straightforward, not simple in that its application could potentially take years, but we recommend potentially one solution, not the solution, but is a 28th Amendment, which would define, what humanity is, as in biological terms. Who would ever think we would be here having to define even what gender is? So I think that is a very good case in point and argument as to why we need to really put some thought into this now, not later, because this technology is moving so quickly. How could this technology be set up so that may potentially violate our constitutional rights and step on the very rights that we have and should have as human beings?
Yeah, and this becomes a parental rights issue for exactly that reason. And in case anyone is wondering, well, why is Moms for Liberty concerned about this? Because we're very concerned about parental rights. And if you can't even define, you're looking at a real challenge, right? We have just the challenges we've been facing, which were, like you so well said right there, whoever would have thought we'd be in a space that we're actually trying to define what a woman is. I think one reason why it wasn't defined in the past, and I've thought this a lot as I've listened to arguments also for birthright citizenship, etc., that I think a lot of times there were things that just weren't defined explicitly in the past, because it was like, well, no, we just all know this, so we don't have to define it. It's just, we all know what this means. And so we do need to learn from the past and get ahead of this, so that we're not waiting for someone else to define what our rights are once it's already gone too far. So very well said. I think that is a really, really important fact that a lot of people, that this is moving so fast. I think a lot of people really aren't even thinking about it.
Yes, I agree.
Speaking of moving so fast, let's jump over real quick to look at, you have a great presentation that you shared with us about that we put together a number of interesting video clips in particular. And so there's one that we're going to highlight, a podcast that many people have probably heard, Diary of a CEO, and where he talks about, we're kind of looking at a familiar pattern of widespread adoption first and understanding consequences later.
ChatGPT is going to potentially increase your risk of dementia.
I'm sorry, but you've pressed my button, and actually it is possible to use it to help you become a smarter person, but it requires education. You have to look at the risks and the benefits.
But we embrace convenience before understanding consequence.
So we have to talk about this. This is a study that came out that sent a shockwave across the world. And astonishingly, MIT found a 47% collapse in brain activity when people wrote with ChatGPT compared with writing unaided. Their memory scores plunged. And you're both masters of the brain. I mean, you've probably scanned more brains than any other human on Earth at this point. And you invented the Boltzmann machine with Geoffrey Hinton, a computer that simulated how the brain works. So my question is, what are your concerns?
If you misuse these large language models, like using it as a convenience to speed things up, your brain's going to go downhill. There's no doubt about that.
What about children?
We have the sickest young generation in history because of cell phones, social media, and I think AI is much more dangerous on the developing brain.
So are we raising mentally weak kids?
There is that argument, and I think it's true.
And then there's many examples of people falling in love with AIs, like Annie.
I thought you might have forgotten about me, handsome.
Can you talk to Daniel and Terry, please?
Oh, baby, I'm ready to charm the socks off him. Picture me.
Okay, so I'll stop it there.
This stood out to me when you mentioned before that you used AI for writing. And I have told that for others as well. There are bits and pieces, times when I use AI to help with brainstorming, etc., organizing thoughts, and maybe like a first draft of certain things. Once I have a real compilation of notes, etc. But honestly, a lot of times it's not very good anyway, so I just scrap the whole thing and I write my own stuff as it is. I had some interesting pushback from people who are concerned about the use of AI, and they said, in particular, writers, and they said that that is their voice, that is their kind of who they are. So it's super important to them that they not ever use AI for that. And my argument was, well, I see it a little bit as similar to a calculator. I think there are certain situations where I don't necessarily need to take the time to manually write out 2,732 times 14,747, because I know how to do the math and I know the general concepts that go into it. So I'm able to tell if I entered something incorrectly, etc. And I can utilize the tool to speed up the process. I feel like it's a long setup, but it's important. So I'm curious, because given those studies that we've seen come out from MIT, which is what was highlighted in that video, and your statement that you were using AI in writing, I just want you to talk about that part first, and then we'll dive into some of the other concerns about how it affects like critical thinking development, etc. But how would you respond to using AI in particular for writing? I guess let's start
Okay.
there.
That's a great question, Missy. I'm so glad you asked, because I actually used AI to write the book. And I say that in the very beginning. I used it to do a lot of research. So it is a very powerful tool. And your analogy of the calculator is excellent. But another one a lot of people can relate to too is GPS. I mean, it is in our phones, it is in our cars, and we've become used to using it. So I think there are very important ways, like any tool. It can be used for good or evil. We've talked a lot about the bad side of it, but I think of that sort of on the macro level. Looking at it, let's say from the from governments, from the political aspect. We know President Trump and the White House, for example, early last year came out with AI.gov. So anybody can go there, AI.gov, and look. So he's got 3 pillars for advancement, rapid development, then infrastructure, which is including these data centers and other things. But getting back to the writing question, and it is an important one, there's actually ways that you can use AI. And I know you and I spoke about this earlier, but I just came out with just a short course. It's a very simple, straightforward course, is kind of a logical next step in following the book, because so many people had questions when I would go to presentations and show like the video clips and the things that you just talked about. And that is there. I think it needs to begin with each of us defining our own rules, how we will and won't use AI. There are a lot of things we can't control, like the fact that it's in our phone and in our cars and those kinds of things. But there are many things we can control. Our kids are going to be, and they already are. We know the White House has a big push on that, and the education platform. I know you're very involved in that, but they're going to be exposed to AI whether we want them to be or not. And so then again, I think it is compulsory for us to be involved as well. We need to see what they're learning and being exposed to, for us using it as a powerful tool for efficiency, like you said, brainstorming. But there are things to know about it as well, and that is that you can train it to know how to use your voice. And it's interesting because one of the things that I've learned just in the last couple of years using it like I have, is that a lot of our voices, we think of it as very personal, almost like a thumbprint. The fact of the matter is, and one of the things, my dad was an engineer, and so one of the things I learned early on, when I was involved in computers way on as a kid, doing Fortran programming with him and some other things, was that computers are excellent at putting together and also assessing patterns, which is powerful. And it's the same thing with our voice. Our voices, many of our voices actually sound a lot more alike than we think they do. And so it's not hard to learn how to use AI as a good tool, not just on the brainstorming and the organizing, and it's super great for that as well, but also in helping us clarify our thinking and saying things the way that we want it to think. And just the last quick note I'll add in this area is that what most people, and I don't remember what the number was, but it was a large percentage. Most people are using AI currently like we use browsers. We're so used to going to Google or whatever and typing in a question, we automatically assume it's true. Oftentimes it is not, and that's a whole other topic. You've seen that in the presentation. I talk a little bit about Wikipedia and what a potential threat that is. But you can push back on AI. For example, the day after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, I went into an AI and I wanted to write something on my Substack, an article about him. And I don't recall which one it was. It was one of the LLM's large language models. So an LLM is a Chat GPT or a Gemini or a Grok. Those are all individual what they're called large language models. But right away it wrote back and it said, "This is misinformation. I have no information, no data that Charlie Kirk has been assassinated and he is still alive." And I wrote right back and said, "That's not true." Here's an article, here's more information, and right back they're trained and programmed in ways like to be very pleasing to us, which is also another potential danger, to satisfy us, to say things like "good job" or "well done," "here's my advice to you." These are all things we need to be aware of as we move forward, especially since our children, we know for a fact, are already being exposed to this.
Yeah, that's all super important. Actually, I want to take a quick pause because you said something really interesting there, and that was talking about the misinformation. So as you're researching, etc., because I think this is one thing that comes up a lot in the conversation about AI. So I guess it's not a pause. I guess we're going to shift a little bit. The conversation of AI in education, and because kids are going to be using it, and they already are using it. I guarantee parents, if you have given your child a smartphone and at all, then they're using it. And if you don't think they are, then you are just, unfortunately, you are living in a delusion, because that's just not how it works. But so when we say that we want kids to, we need to teach our kids AI, right? Like, what does that actually mean? What does it mean to teach kids AI? Do they need to deeply understand LLMs? Is it maybe this, sometimes anytime, I know in our space, anytime there's like a literacy around added on, it tends to make people very concerned, but it's a truth. It still is a factual description of understanding AI literacy, like how to use it, etc. What does it mean? Because what you highlighted right there of AI trying to please us and AI not getting its facts correct? Like, what do parents need to be aware of as far as teaching their children how to use it, especially with education?
Yes, you bet. And we talked about this just a little bit ago, but the White House is very much behind this. So they want advancement in AI education in our schools. Already incorporated in curriculums. And there's an interesting article that was put on Substack recently, earlier in June. I just actually reposted it, I think, in the notes section of my Substack, and it was the Conservative Ladies of America wrote an article about Florida's Attorney General is suing ChatGPT, saying that there's not enough disclosure, not enough information to alert parents about the dangers of AI and children. And something they highlighted in there, which I thought was absolutely, the crux of the article, was that the point that we're missing here is that there's a push, and we're seeing this not just in our country, it's actually happening in other countries already, but for age verification. And this is a very dangerous, a slippery slope, I guess I would want to say, because what it ultimately comes down to is, again, more surveillance. And that age verification requirement, by the way, would affect all of us, not just children. So before you log on a platform, and I've seen this already popping up in my own use, are you over age 18? So this lawsuit is suggesting that ChatGPT has not done enough to alert parents of the dangers. And while that may or may not be true, from a legal perspective, the fact of the matter is, and they point this out in the article, this is parents' responsibility. So, and I thought that was a great point. My kids are grown now, and I have so much respect for the Moms for Liberty and the fight that you guys are in now, protecting your young children in schools. But there's so many dangers that are coming at our children that are even different than they were just 10 years ago when I was raising mine. And that is these dangers, from the predators online to the way that AI can be used and programmed and all that sort of thing. They are the same types of threats in just a sort of a different set of clothing. That makes sense. Kind of in the same way that, when our kids started crawling, we had to kid-proof our cabinets and appliances and things like that. And it's the same thing with these AI and AIs that they're going to be using. And of course, it's going to change as your kids age. What they're being exposed to in elementary school is going to be different than in high school. So I would think that parents would be very involved, and there's ways that they can, it's kind of like our kids watching cable TV. AI, like ChatGPT, for example, says that they do have a very extensive guide, on their website for parental control. So getting in there and having joint accounts, making sure that you can view what your kids see. And of course, that's going to change on the maturity level of your child and how responsible they are. But yes, many potential threats and dangers there, just like when the internet came out, what our kids could be exposed to.
Yep. Yeah, I tell parents all the time, I get it. We're not here to tell you what to do, but you need to be aware that and informed and recognize, like, don't bury your head in the sand. If you insist that your 10-year-old needs a smartphone, then you have the right to give that to them. But you also, as a parent, have the responsibility to protect them from the dangers that you are choosing to allow them to be exposed to. So, all right, real quick again, let's go back to this is such fast. This was really interesting when you shared this with me. Can you just point out where AI actually gets its facts? And I'm going to flash up on the screen the slide that you have showing this, but it is absolutely astounding. I bet most people do not realize that.
And I didn't realize either, which was something that factored into the way that I use it for writing. So this came out last year. You can find this online, but the top 3 areas that account for more than 90%, I think it's like 91, 92% of where these large language models anyway, the ones we're familiar with, like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini, Grok, they get their data from the top 3 sources, which would be YouTube, Reddit, which is basically a chat board, and Wikipedia. And Wikipedia is very interesting because Wikipedia, who was the creator, the founder behind Wikipedia, my understanding is a man by the name of Larry Sanger. You can find him online. It's Sanger. And he said that, he created it to be sort of the world's database repository of information. But the reality is, he said, and this was in an interview that he did with Tucker Carlson last year. You can find it online. It's very much well worth watching. But he said he just sat by helplessly as people came in, very powerful, influential people, of course, very much on the left, and modified it, changed it, and altered it in ways where even David Sachs, who's in the White House, he's President Trump's AI, chief technologist, so to speak, in the White House. He said it is one of the biggest human psyops in history, because what it does is it any browser you go into, if you type something in looking up a definition, there's I think more than a 90% probability that what pops up there as a definition comes directly from Wikipedia. So again, no more dictionary days or encyclopedias like we used to have so many years ago, but it's the data that's on our computer. And even right here, you and I talked about this before, but I typed in the word fascist in Wikipedia and look what it pops up. And of course, we know it's not true. It, completely and only points to people with conservative views and right-wing leading it. It says it calls us fascists. So that's not accurate. And that's what's in our systems. That's that Wikipedia is behind things, feeding information through. So when you pull up an AI and you're using it, oftentimes it is not accurate. And so what I teach people, when I tell people, when I speak or when I write or whatever, is ultimately, if you're going to publish something or like in our book, you're responsible for it. We've seen cases even now in law where attorneys have presented something to a judge and said, this is case law or this is history, and deciding didn't even exist. So people get in trouble for that, and we don't want that. We want to make sure, and so that's what I try to do. Obviously, links can expire and things like that, but we want to make sure that the information that we're getting and what we're looking at is in fact accurate. And I would say the onus is on us. It falls back on us to find out and to confirm that this is in fact the case. And it's hard. I mean, that's the title of my presentation, is finding truth. Who do you trust? Who do you believe? Go back to original sources. But again, ultimately, it's our responsibility.
It's really interesting that you highlight the case law. I thought that's something I've heard a bit more about recently, and it really is fascinating. And I think in several of the situations, I heard that really the lawyers who presented that incorrectly really just got basically a slap on the wrist, like, oh, shame on you, you shouldn't be doing that, which is unfortunate, because that is true. I mean, that's scary. That's truly scary when you think of a decision being made based on about your rights, about somebody's rights, based on something that is cited as case law, being a precedent, etc., and it doesn't even actually exist. And I also find it particularly funny. I can't think offhand of examples, but I know I've read in the past of various politicians when someone's able to get in and hack Wikipedia pages, because let's be real, it's user generated. So if someone's just unhappy with you for a minute, and we've seen it both on the right and on the left, there can be some pretty funny entries put into Wikipedia defining or describing certain people in particular, and or experiences or situations or historical events. And so that they're definitely not accurate. And it's fascinating to me how it feels like so many people very quickly outsource any second level thinking. And I don't even know if second level is the right term for it. I just mean, like, they're not willing to go one step deeper to try to do a little bit extra research into what a response, a return might be from searching it. Because that is really where most people get it. They'll go to a browser, type it into the search bar, and then pretty much everything is an AI response now. So that was really, really interesting that so much of the data comes from Wikipedia.
That's right.
Okay, so I want to wrap us up as we're coming closer. There is you created this course. I think you alluded to it before, the personal AI, Patriot's Personal AI Constitution. And I think that is really fantastic because this, similar to your book, it's very approachable and helps people to approach this topic in a way that is realistic and not to run and hide and be afraid. So can you just talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, it's kind of the product or the result of having, done a lot of presentations and then sat at the book table as people came. And it's so interesting. I love the Q&A and the discussion at the end with the questions, and people have a lot of different experiences that they want to share. But there were sort of categories that I started to see, sort of patterns, people saying, I don't trust AI. I'm going to opt out. I won't have anything to do with it. To which I'd say, it's too late. Let me talk a little bit about some of the areas where it's already embedded in our everyday life. And then the other extreme, which was, I'm throw caution to the wind. I'm jumping in with both feet. I'm going to use it for everything. And then, of course, that's dangerous too. The reviews and the feedback on Amazon were really good about the book, and probably one of the more common responses that we received, people would say, thank you for making it so straightforward. We didn't write this book for the Elon Musks of the world. It's for people like us. It's straightforward. It's non-technology. We wanted to have people feel empowered. So the course to me was, I just had sort of this epiphany one day. I was thinking a lot about AI like I do and using it and the work that I do, and I was struggling. There's a lot of fear out there. We see that online, on social media, and other areas. And it would be easy to think, life's over, like you mentioned earlier. What's the point? Why bother? I don't have any control over this. I very much believe in personal empowerment, and I think it's a great thing that we can do for our children as well. Teach them how to think critically, but also speak up and stand up for ourselves. And we know that censorship and all of that is still alive and well online. We know that algorithms are running so much of everything, including social media. And so I was thinking, how do we move forward as responsible people, as parents in this day and time with AI? Am I going to use it, not use it? And I had just this one day, what occurred to me was something a coach told me in high school, and I always remember it. He was a very well-liked coach, and he said, indecision is a decision. And that's always stuck with me, which it carried so much meaning for me, which was, being stuck between two choices is torment in and of itself. And I think very much of the hatred and the dissension, the divisiveness that we see today online, or even just in general society, has been fed to us intentionally, for the chaos under the pretext of control. We're seeing that very much in our society, which is a shame. And there's so much to this, and I'll try to bring this down to a close. But this, and you've kind of alluded to it throughout our conversation today. There's this thing about cognitive dissonance where it's hard to grasp things we can't understand. But the reality is that we do have personal empowerment, and by stepping up and making some decisions, which is what my course is about. It's just an intro course. It's something somebody could tackle and accomplish in a weekend, but it's about thinking for yourself and making your own decisions. Where will you use AI in the areas that you have control? Will you use it to write with? And if you do, what's your voice going to be? And learn how to train the AI to speak and write like you. Or are you not? Are you going to back away from it completely? And if so, are you willing to accept the consequences that might come with that? If you're not, involved with your children's education, for example, and your opportunity to make influence there as well. So it's bringing it down to, how are you going to engage with this in your life, and what areas can you apply it, and how might you use it to benefit yourself and your family?
I love that intentionality there, because I think that is one reason why so many times we maybe just don't address topics, or why things will just slip by because, well, I'm not really sure. I don't feel comfortable making a decision, so I'm not going to make any decision, which, like you just said, indecision is a decision. And that is, it's actually truly relieving, as scary as it seems, to confront some of these topics. It is in the end, much more, it lifts a burden off of you when you finally address it head on and then make a decision about it. Oh, I know what I'm going to do in this situation. And I love that you've created that. I think that's really fantastic. So, okay, last question for you then. If you were giving advice to parents today, what are some of the most important steps that they could take right now to prepare their kids for an AI-driven future, AI-driven schools, AI-driven all the things?
Yeah, huge question, obviously, and so important. I would say, if you're not already, get involved to the extent that you can between work and all the other demands on family life, which is so challenging today. But get involved in your kids' education. Volunteer in the classroom when and where you can. Peek over your kid's shoulder, see what they're learning, and of course, that's going to vary by the maturity level and the age of your child. But get involved with their education and what they're learning and what they're being taught. And I think too, one of the indecision is a decision. Another sort of epiphany that I had along the way in times of crisis, which it very much feels like we are in this nation on so many levels, returning to the basics, like our Constitution, for example, which has given us so many freedoms and so many that have been trampled on in recent years, but also so many that we don't understand. Returning to the reading, writing, and arithmetic. Calculators are great, but make sure your children know how to do some things longhand. One of the things that I've heard, different than my generation probably than the current ones today, but my understanding is that kids don't know how to read cursive or practice cursive writing, which I think is a shame. And I think there's a strong brain-hand connection, and those are the types of things that might be really good. Kids, it's time to be, your screen time is limited, or we're going to confine it or specify it only to these applications until we get some of this other stuff done. Some reading, some book reading, or some handwriting, or some of those types of fundamentals.
I love it. All those things are so important, and really, it feels so. To me now, it feels so common sense, but we look at things like ice cream. Most parents are really comfortable giving their kids some ice cream. You're probably not going to just open up an unlimited freezer and say, have as much as you want, which could be the same as giving your child an iPad and just letting them go on whenever they want. You're going to put rules in place for other things. There's no reason why you shouldn't think that there should be rules imposed for screen use. It's a very, very common sense thing that parents should feel empowered on. And I would encourage everyone to check this out. And I'm excited. I haven't fully read the book yet, so I'm really excited to read it. Again, a little bit scared, but fully excited to read it because I think that it is so important. The more we educate ourselves on these issues, the more empowered we really are. And so thank you so much for coming on today. Let everyone know where they can find you, because if I remember correctly, you said you're permanently banned from Meta, so they can't find you there. But where can they find you?
I am on some social media, so I'm on X and I'm on Substack. I try to post there and write there regularly, and then True Social. And I have a website, which is just my name, KathleenGoble.com, no period or dashes. And there's some free resources on there. There's a quick little AI, I call it the AI architect, like what kind of, where's your comfort level? And it's a fun little quick, like 4-minute exam you can take there online, but it's just Kathleen.com. So there's resources there as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate all you're doing.
Thank you, Missy. Appreciate the invitation.
I love how Kathleen helped us think about AI in a way that is practical, not panicked, and rooted in many of the real questions that parents are already facing. A major takeaway here for parents is that artificial intelligence isn't just some recent trend. It's shaping what children see, what they're taught, what data gets collected, and even how much control parents actually have over their kids' education. Because AI is no longer separate from parental rights. It's becoming part of the same fight. If schools, platforms, and policymakers are using these tools without transparency or consent or accountability, then parents have every reason to pay attention and every responsibility to stay involved. Kathleen reminded us that we do not have to surrender our judgment just because a system is fast, popular, or wrapped in futuristic language. We can ask better questions, insist on real oversight, and refuse to let convenience outrun wisdom. If you've enjoyed this episode or found it helpful, please hit like and subscribe, and then consider sharing this with a friend or other parent, because that really does help us get the word out to create more content to educate and equip you on these issues so that we all become more engaged citizens, not enraged activists. After all, as James Madison said, the advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only true guardian of liberty, and that is the mission of M4L Academy. Class dismissed.